Hello and welcome to my channel. In this video, I'm going to take you through the concept of project baselining, what it means and what is required. My name is Oscar Mbira. I'm a certified program and project manager. So in this section of the video, we are going to look at what is baselining in project management. So we are looking at what is baselining, what is baselining in project management. In project management. So what we are trying to understand here is the meaning of baselining a project. Most people or most project managers, they make a mistake to think that baselining, it's only for the schedule or the project plan. That is not always the case, and that is not always right. In some cases, you baseline a number of components for you to conclude that my project is now baselined. So in this video, we're going to look at these specific components that we have to baseline. So for us to understand what is project baselining, we're going to look at it from two angles, from the start and to the end. So we are going to have a line like this, okay? And then we are going to put a line like this on this side. All right, so here, let me put the end also. Okay, so we are going to have the start date here. When you're baselining a plan, you should know the start date. And we are also going to have initial values. So I'm going to put initial values, okay? Then we're going to have end values and also end dates. So I'm going to use a different color now. So as you go through your project, most projects, they have what are called stages or phases, okay? So assuming your project is going to have, say, 3 stages or phases. A project can have as many as possible. So this one is going to be a stage. I want to call it a stage, project stage. And then you might want to call it phase, project phase. Assuming this is phase 1, okay? Then we have a stage also, or phase. I want to call this phase or stage number 2. Then you have stage or phase, which I want to call phase number 3. A project can have a number of these, but for the purposes of explaining why we need project baselining in project management, I'm going to use only these 3 stages. So there are certain parameters or components that you have to consider when you're baselining a project. So what do you mean by baselining? You want to create a reference where you can make comparisons. It could be cost, it could be budget, but you want to make a reference. So in project management terms, this process of making a reference is called project baselining. So let us look at the components. There are 10 of them which we are going to discuss here that make up a project baseline. So for us to appreciate that, I'm going to show about 4 columns. So the first one is going to be the component. Okay, the component that we are going to look at when baselining a project. So this one, I'm going to put a line here. Then after the component, we're going to have start value or baseline value. So I'm going to use the word baseline, okay, value, okay. Then I'm also going to have what is called current or actual value. So actual or current value. We're going to populate this as we go. Then the last one is deviation. Okay? Deviation value. So this is the whole concept about project baselining. So the first component we're going to look at is called scope. So number one, we're going to have scope. Okay, so scope baseline. Okay, then number two, we are going to have what is called timeline or schedule baseline. Timeline, a baseline. Okay, so most project managers, or if someone is new to project management, they only think of baselining only to consider timeline, but there are more to this. Number three, we're going to have what is called cost or budget baseline. This is a critical component of projects. So we have cost and budget. Then number four, we're going to look at what is called resource baseline or structure baseline. So we are going to say organizational structure. Okay, organizational structure baseline. Okay. After this, we are also going to look at what's called quality baseline. So you also need to put your quality baseline. It's also a very important component. Okay, number 6, we are going to look at what is called a risk baseline. You also need to baseline your risk. Okay. So let's go on. Number 7, there's something called milestone baseline. So you also need to document milestone baseline. Okay. Then number 8, we have what is called assumption baseline. So all the assumptions that you need to put them here. And then number 9, we also have what is called constraint baseline. Any constraints that we have. Constraint baseline. Okay. Then number 10 that we're going to look at is called technical baseline. Technical baseline. Okay. So let us look at this. What we are saying here is for each and every stage in a project baselining process, you have different stages in a project. You also have stage number 1, stage number 2, stage number 3, according to this example. For each and every stage, you should be able to validate these components against each and every stage. So what it means is, when you're baselining your project, you're baselining basically 10 components in general. You can put more, but for these purposes of learning here, I'm going to put 10. So for each and every component, you want to baseline, which means you want to record the reference point or initial value. I'm going to give 2 examples for these components for clarity. Say, for example, you want to baseline your project to run for 18 months, okay? So you are going to put 18 months. That's your baseline. Now, assuming the current value for the timeline is 20 months. So you now have 20 months here. What it means is you have spent more months as compared to what you had baselined or what you had referenced. So you have a deviation of minus 2 months as of today. So you have a deviation of 2 months. Okay? Another example, we are talking about budget, assuming your baseline amount or costs or budget is 2 million. Okay? And now you have spent only 1.2 million. So you have spent 1.2. So there's no deviation. Okay? So the main reason for baselining a project is to be able to record these components. Why are we recording these components? These are going to be used as a reference. So I can give you a good example. If you want to travel from your home to your city, your starting point for you to measure how many kilometers from your house to the city is your house. So as you move from your house all the way up to the city, you are able to calculate and to show that I've moved 2 kilometers, I've moved 1 kilometer, I've moved 3 kilometers. The same also applies to a project. For you to be able to measure the performance of the project, you must baseline, which means you must give some reference point, some reference data. You are able to say, now I was supposed to spend 2 million, I spent 1.2 million. The same also applies, some of these components, they might not be very specific to be numeric. I hope you're enjoying the video so far. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to click the like button and the subscribe button so that you're the first person to be notified each time a new video is uploaded on this channel. As you start your project, during the initiation stage, you should be able to pick all these components and also identify how are you going to measure them, how are you going to document your components when you're baselining the project, not the project plan. So, for example, I can give milestones. You might have 6 milestones when you baseline the project. So I'm going to use M for milestone and 6 for the 6 milestones. So you have 6 milestones, okay? But your actual current value, you might find as you go through the project, either due to some other reasons, your milestones are increasing. For example, you now have 8 milestones, okay? Which means you have deviated from the 6 up to 8. So you now have -2 milestones. So there are different recordings that you can take for each and every component to make informed decision, because you have the baseline, you also have the current value. So each time there's any deviation, you are able to pick proactively the deviation and make corrections. So let's revisit again. What is baselining in project management? Baselining in project management is a process of creating references that we are going to use in future to compare the performance of the project. So in this video, we are looking at 10 components. The scope baseline, you also need to specify the baseline for the scope. Say for example, scope, you only want 2 products to be produced by the project. Okay, so in your scope, you say 2 products. This is what you expect to cover as an example. Then also on the timeline, you want to baseline the timeline. I want the project to run, or according to a business case, the project is supposed to run for 18 months. Say after 18 months, you have not managed to run the project, it has gone up to 20 months. It means you have a deviation of -2 months. So if you're a project manager, this is important. You now know that you are now ahead of what was budgeted for, or you have more than what was budgeted for. Then you need to take corrective measures, or else you have to go to the project board to get approval for the additional months or the additional budget that you're having in a project. Then the next one is on the cost or the budget. There could be so many reasons why the cost can go up. It could be additional components being brought into the project, or additional ingredients being brought into the project, or maybe there's a rework of some of the deliverables that will also increase the cost of the project. So when you baselined, it was 2 million. According to current value, it's 1.2 million. So this metric is very important for the project manager, because you are going to be able to know that how far are you from the original budget, and proactively you can even go to the project sponsor or project board to highlight that you have gone 1.2 million of the budget and the project is actually at 60% completion. So the 40%, it might not be enough for you to get for the 1.2. So as a project manager, this is very important to know, and this is very important also to track. You must have all the components that you use for baselining. Then organizational structure, again, it can be baselined, which means the organizational structure of the project, not of the company, of the project. It can be baselined. Say for example, it's a program, you want to have 2 project managers. So your structure is going to have 2 project managers. Assuming along the way, there are sub-projects that might come up that might require a dedicated project manager. So you might end up with more than what you had budgeted for. For example, you were running a project with 2 project managers. Now you want 4 project managers. So there's a deviation of -2, okay, which means you have an additional 2 as compared to the baseline of 2 project managers. For example, you might also run a project where you have 2 suppliers, okay? So you have 2 suppliers. I'm going to put SUP for supplier, and then now you need 3 suppliers. I'm going to put SUP again for supplier, which means you have a deviation of 1. So I'm just giving an example on what you can baseline in terms of these components. You can also baseline in terms of your risk, for example. You can also baseline in terms of your milestones. how many milestones are you expecting to run in your project, and also assumptions. How many assumptions and which assumptions were part of the baselining of the project, and as of today, it could be due to some regulatory changes, it could be due to some technical changes, it could be due to some other global crisis. We have seen what happened to many projects during the COVID-19 era. So those assumptions, you also need to put them there. Then you can also have constraints, okay? You can also have constraints in the project that are baselining. For example, you might say, I've got budget constraints, technical constraints, resource constraints, human resource constraints. So all those assumptions, you put them there. And then as you go through the project from start up to the end, you start making the comparison. You can also have the technical baseline items. For example, you can talk of tools. You can have a technical to say, I'm going to baseline to use these specific tools or these specific standards, for example. You might talk of standards, technical standards. So you also baseline these items. As you move from one stage to the other, when you're running your project up to the end, you make a comparison of these values against what has been baselined. In most cases, baselined items, they are approved by either the project board or the project steering committee. If you want me to do specific video on each of these items, let me know in the comment section below. You type any of these components, and then I'll produce a video specific to that component. So this is what I wanted to cover in this section of the video. In summary, there are 10 components that we have to look at.